Rowan, walk me into that first second back in the kitchen. People imagine a hero's welcome, but homes can feel like minefields too. What did you notice first?
Not relief, regret. I dropped my bag by the counter, set my cap down, and waited for a hug that never came. Delaney stared like I'd walked in from the dead. Cyrus gripped the chair like it kept him upright. Tamsin went ghost white. Someone said, "You survived," and it sounded like a complaint. I tried a joke, months overdue, but their eyes slid away. Then Cyrus said, soft as a blade, "Maybe you should extend your deployment." Every head turned toward me, expectant. I said I couldn't, so I offered a lie. Burn pits, rare cancer, 8 months left. For one unguarded beat, I caught smirks. Then they remembered to look sad.
That first night, the room goes quiet, and suddenly you're hearing the real story behind the smiles. What did you do, and what did you overhear that changed everything?
I said I was exhausted and stretched out on the couch with my back to the room. When the lights went off, I kept my breathing slow and steady. From the kitchen came mugs and low voices. Then the part they never meant me to hear. Delaney whispered, almost excited, that my policy could pay out around $400,000. Cyrus said they'd need it soon. Tamsin chimed in, bright with plans, and Blaze Harker laughed about quitting work once the money hit. They talked about a truck, a business, a wedding, like my death was a calendar event. I stared into the dark and understood two things at once. They wanted me gone, and they were already practicing how to spend me.
There's a moment when you realize anger won't save you. Strategy will. When did you decide to play along, and how did you make them believe your lie?
Overseas taught me revenge didn't have to be loud. It could be patient. So I leaned into their fantasy and became the dying son they wanted. I moved like my joints ached, shoulders heavy, steps uncertain. I coughed into tissues and pressed my thumb to my lips so the fabric showed red. I wheezed right after money talk and watched their faces brighten before they remembered concern. When Blay bragged about a truck, I let my voice crack and said I wished I could help him drive it. Delaney patted my arm like a nurse doing rounds. Cyrus asked about paperwork, not comfort. The more I performed, the bolder they became, and the easier it was to predict their next move.
That first signature moment, it's chilling because it looks so normal. What was the first concrete step they took to profit from you, and how did you respond?
A few days in, Cyrus slid paperwork across the table with a fatherly smile. "Just family paperwork," he said, like we were signing a birthday card. I let my hands tremble, pretended my eyes couldn't focus, and asked him to read the key parts aloud. He didn't notice I was listening for intent. It was a loan against my life insurance, $100,000, taken early because I was terminal. He wanted my signature so it looked legitimate. Delaney hovered behind him, rubbing her wrist, too nervous to meet my eyes. I signed like a loyal son and said, "Whatever helps the family." Inside, I marked it as fraud, and once they crossed that line, I knew they'd keep walking.
Blaze sounds like the kind of reckless that lights a fuse. How did his behavior escalate things, and what were you quietly hiding from them?
Blaze didn't pretend to be cautious. One afternoon, he walked in with a cardboard box from his office, grinning, and announced he'd quit. He replayed the call like a trophy, then bragged he faked half his resume and nobody checked. Tamsin laughed like it was charming. I nodded, wheezed on cue, and let them think I was stuck waiting for treatments. What they didn't know was my life had restarted elsewhere. I'd come home with a promotion and a $300,000 bonus. A Mercedes sat in Iron Key storage, and a furnished penthouse in Port Ravelin was waiting. Every day they pictured me in a clinic chair. I was building a life they couldn't touch. Their greed was loud, my silence kept me steady.
You tested them with hope, and their reaction told you everything. When did you first check whether they actually wanted you to live?
At dinner, I mentioned my white blood cell count was improving, that maybe the cancer wasn't as aggressive. Tamsin's fork clattered. Delaney's cup froze halfway to her lips. Cyrus forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Blaze spoke too quickly, warning me false hope was cruel and I should prepare for the worst. Tamsin piled on, urging me not to chase miracles. Nobody asked what the doctor recommended. Nobody sounded relieved. They sounded like gamblers protecting a bet. I nodded, played grateful, and pushed food around my plate. In my head, I saw my penthouse in Port Ravelin and the Mercedes in Iron Key storage. Proof I didn't need them. Their panic wasn't for my pain, it was for their schedule.
The binder, that detail is brutal because it's planning disguised as being responsible. When did you realize they were already spending your death, and what did that planning look like?
Delaney brought out a binder like she was planning a wedding, not a funeral. She'd circled the cheapest casket option and tapped it with satisfaction. She announced Tamsin would give the eulogy, like that made it noble. Cyrus said they told the funeral home the bill would be paid in full from my insurance, though they wouldn't spend a dime. Then damage surfaced in pieces. Cyrus had already cashed out his retirement and eaten the penalty. Tamsin quit school one semester from finishing. Delaney broke her lease and dared the landlord to sue because we'll be rich soon. I sat there wheezing for their benefit while they tallied my future like a paycheck. That binder didn't just hurt, it rewired something in me.
Greed is one thing, danger is another. When did it turn, and what did you hear that night that made you think this could get ugly?
Late one night, I heard a speakerphone voice I didn't recognize. Thick accent, casino noise humming behind it. Cyrus was asking for another 100 grand, promising the insurance would pay out within 2 months. The voice asked if he understood what happened when people didn't pay. Blaze chimed in, casual, saying my organs were failing and it wouldn't be long. Cyrus didn't sound like a man borrowing from a bank. He sounded like prey. My life wasn't just an upcoming payout anymore. It was collateral in someone else's hands. I went back to my room and stared at the ceiling, realizing my family had tied us all to people who collected without paperwork. Worse, if their timeline slipped, they might decide to make the ending happen by force.
And then the coffee. People underestimate how terrifying small things become when trust is dead. What was the moment you realized they might speed your death up themselves?
The next morning, Delaney did something she hadn't done once since I came home. She brought me coffee and hovered while I drank. The cup smelled fine, but the first sip tastes bitter in the wrong way, like metal hiding under roast. Her eyes never left my face. I took another sip, kept my expression neutral, then set it down and thanked her. When she finally walked away, I poured it out. At the bottom was residue that wasn't grounds, something half dissolved. I bagged a sample, snapped a photo, then hid it in my sock drawer. My heartbeat slowed into something colder. They weren't just hoping I'd die. They were testing whether my death could be managed like a task.
Outside pressure can turn a bad family into a dangerous one fast. What started closing in, and how did it change their behavior toward you?
The calls started before sunrise, and they didn't stop. A man who called himself Quentin Rask left messages for Cyrus, calm and polite, as if collecting overdue rent. Then the politeness faded. One afternoon, a stranger in a suit, Silas Corbett, appeared on the porch with an empty smile. Delaney's face drained when she saw him through the blinds. Cyrus met him outside, voice too loud, promising payment soon. When Corbett finally left, the house felt smaller. Cyrus snapped at me for breathing too loudly. Blaze watched me like a clock. Delaney hovered with pills and drinks I didn't ask for, acting like care was her job. The pressure wasn't on them, it was on me to die on schedule. I slept with my phone in my palm and stopped eating anything I didn't see opened.
You didn't confront, you built a trap that looked like surrender. What plan did you make to protect yourself without tipping them off?
I knew if I confronted them, I'd become an accident. So I built a plan that looked like compliance. I told Cyrus I wanted to update beneficiaries and sign medical paperwork so nobody struggled when I got worse. His eyes lit up for a heartbeat before he remembered to look sad. I suggested we do it properly at the Port Ravelin Notary Bureau with witnesses on Sunday. Delaney agreed too fast. Tamsin asked what time like she was booking dinner. That night I gathered photos, the coffee residue, and every note I'd kept. I drafted a message to Arden Pike, hit save instead of send, and kept my phone charged like it was oxygen. I wasn't going to beg them to be human. I was going to catch them.
The first person you tell the truth to often decides whether you survive. Who did you trust, and what did they tell you to do next?
I sent the message to Arden Pike at dawn before anyone else woke up. He answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting for disaster. I told him everything, payout talk, the loan, the collector, the coffee. Arden didn't gasp. He went quiet, the way he used to before a firefight. He said, don't confront them, don't eat anything you don't control, and don't walk into a station with a story and no proof. He told me to keep samples, photos, dates, and to act until evidence would hold. Then he gave me two names, Detective Dorian Klein in Stoneleaf and insurance investigator Imogen Ferris. If they're stealing your death, Arden said, you need people who speak their language.
Fear is chaos, evidence is order. How did you start turning panic into proof you could actually use?
I drove to the library in Beltide, far enough nobody would casually see my car, and sat under fluorescent lights like they could protect me. I looked up life insurance fraud, loans against policies, and what intent meant in court. I read poisoning cases and how labs documented chain of custody. Then I opened a new email account under a name that wasn't mine and started uploading everything. Photos of residue, screenshots of Quentin Rask's voicemails, notes on dates and phrases, even a picture of Delaney's funeral binder. Every file got a timestamp. I printed key pages and sealed them in an envelope. I kept my hands steady because shaky hands make sloppy evidence, and sloppy evidence lets predators walk back into your life. For the first time since I came home, fear felt useful.
You didn't just collect proof, you designed witnesses. What did you set up for Sunday to create evidence instead of more danger?
I confirmed the Port Ravelin Notary Bureau appointment and got the witness requirement in writing. Then I quietly booked a consult at Sablebrook Hospice Services with Maribel Crowther. I needed a paper trail showing I was competent and a neutral professional to hear how my family spoke when they thought the end was near. I practiced turning my phone recorder on with one hand, screen dark. Sunday morning, Delaney dressed like we were attending a ceremony. Cyrus kept checking his watch. Tamsin and Blaze followed, whispering about timelines they thought I couldn't hear. At hospice, Maribel asked careful questions. Delaney answered too fast like she'd rehearsed. Blaze joked about when it's finally over, then caught himself. Maribel's eyes sharpened. Mine stayed down. I made sure every word landed somewhere outside that house.
The notary room is where coercion hates daylight. What did they try to get you to sign? And how did you keep control without blowing your cover?
Cyrus arrived with a folder already tabbed, like he'd rehearsed the order of my signatures. He kept saying, just initials, as if that made it harmless. Delaney sat too close, her hand on my shoulder, squeezing when I hesitated. Tamsin watched the notary's face, measuring whether he believed our little play. I asked the notary to read each document aloud and confirm I understood. That single request changed the room. Cyrus got impatient. Blaze tried to answer for me. I looked straight at the notary and said, please speak to me. The notary slowed down, asked if anyone was pressuring me, and I said I wanted time on anything medical. Cyrus's jaw tightened. Delaney's smile trembled. I signed only what I meant to sign, and nothing more.
When a real professional finally listens, sometimes you almost cry because sanity sounds like a human voice. When did law enforcement enter, and what did that first conversation feel like?
After the notary, Cyrus drove in silence, knuckles white on the wheel, like he was deciding which bridge to throw me off. I waited until I was alone, then called the number Arden gave me. Detective Dorian Klein answered, calm and professional, and I almost cried from the sound of normal. I told him I was a soldier home from deployment, that my family believed I was dying, and I had reason to think they wanted it to be true. He didn't laugh. He asked for dates, names, how I knew what I knew. When I mentioned the loan and the coffee residue, his tone sharpened. He told me not to confront them, not to eat or drink anything they handed me, and to keep the sample sealed. Then he asked me to meet.
Police can chase crimes, but insurance investigators speak paperwork like a native language. What did Imogen add that the police couldn't, and why was she so important?
Imogen Ferris met me like she'd been expecting my story all her career. She didn't ask how it felt, she asked how it was structured. She pulled up my policy, explained how a loan could be flagged, and why my family rushing paperwork looked like a map of intent. When I mentioned the funeral binder, she nodded like she'd seen that confidence before. She said fraud cases were built on patterns. Who called, who paid, who benefited, who lied. Then she asked, who has access to what you eat and drink? I answered, and she didn't flinch. She warned me to stop accepting anything I couldn't open myself, to label every sample, and to let Klein send it through the Port Ravelin toxicology lab. Fraud is paperwork, she said, but poisoning is urgency.
The chain of custody detail matters because truth can die in paperwork errors. How did you handle toxicology without letting your family sense authorities were involved?
Detective Klein met me behind the Stoneleaf Police Department and treated the coffee sample like a crime scene exhibit. He photographed it, sealed it, and documented every hand that touched it. Then he arranged delivery to the Port Ravelin toxicology lab so chain of custody couldn't be questioned. I went back home and acted weaker than ever. Delaney offered food, pills, tea, little kindnesses with a timer inside. I smiled, drank water I poured myself, and let everything else sit untouched. Cyrus started leaving more, coming back tense like the collector's shadow chased him. Blaze and Tamsin argued in whispers about how long this is taking. I pretended not to hear. Every night I replayed their faces when they thought I wasn't listening. My job was survival, not closure.
People will ask, why not just leave? As if disappearing is always freedom. Did you ever consider running, and what stopped you?
I thought about leaving every hour. I had a furnished penthouse in Port Ravelin, a car nobody knew about, enough money to vanish, but I remember Delaney watching my mouth when I drank that coffee. Not like a mother, like someone checking a result. I remembered Cyrus using my insurance like a credit line. I remembered Tamsin laughing about a wedding funded by my death. If I ran, they'd call me unstable. They'd claim I was sick and confused. They might even find another target to solve their debt. I couldn't let them rewrite the story after trying to erase me. So I stayed and made staying a strategy. I recorded what I could, kept my movements predictable, and waited for proof to stack high enough that nobody could kick it over.
You turned a library into an armory. What did studying the law teach you, and how did it change your mindset inside that house?
The library in Beltide didn't feel like a library anymore. It felt like an armory. I read statutes about insurance fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and what attempt meant in poisoning cases. The language was cold, but clear. It didn't matter they hadn't succeeded. It mattered they took steps. Cyrus forging access to my policy wasn't helping. It was a federal line. Delaney slipping sedatives into coffee wasn't care. It was assault. Tamsin and Blaze talking about stronger methods wasn't stress. It was intent. Knowledge didn't calm me, it sharpened me. It gave me a map of consequences and told me what evidence mattered. I stopped thinking like a betrayed son and started thinking like a witness building a case.
Let's talk mechanics, because survival is often boring, deliberate, and invisible. How did you record the truth inside that house without them noticing?
I stopped at Redfern Hardware and bought 3 small recorders that looked like everyday clutter. When the house emptied, Cyrus out running errands, Delaney at a relative's, Tamsin and Blaze pretending to shop for a future, they left me alone with their secrets. I placed one device in the kitchen where money talk always returned. I tucked another near the couch where I slept because night made them careless. The last faced the dining table, the stage for Cyrus's paperwork. I checked angles, distance, volume, then erased the setup from the room with my hands. After that, I acted weaker, not braver. The sicker I looked, the bolder they became. Bold people make mistakes, and mistakes leave fingerprints. Those devices weren't curiosity, they were my seatbelt.
You also brought in a neutral witness without turning it into a fight, which is smart and frankly rare under stress. How did you do that?
I called Sablebrook Hospice Services and asked for a palliative care consult conversation with my family present. The coordinator's gentleness almost made me flinch. My house had taught me how easily care can be faked. I told a clean story: end-stage cancer, limited time, family overwhelmed. They assigned Maribel Crowther. She asked steady questions, diagnosis, symptoms, timeline, and I answered with the same lie I'd fed Delaney and Cyrus. Then I chose Sunday at 2 and insisted everyone hear the same information together. Maribel agreed, said it would prevent confusion, and promised she'd bring forms and guidance. When I hung up, I felt structure. I didn't need a showdown. I needed trained eyes to notice what my family thought was invisible.
You triggered systems before your family could burn the trail. That's what strategy looks like. What did you do to get everything moving?
I bought a burner phone and called the insurance fraud hotline, giving just enough to trigger an audit without tying it to me. I gave the policy number, flagged the loan, and said the access pattern looked wrong. When the agent asked who I was, I said, "A concerned party," and hung up. The next day, I walked into the Stoneleaf Police Department and asked for Detective Dorian Klein. In a small room, I laid out the chain, my fake diagnosis, their reaction, Cyrus's paperwork, Delaney's binder, Quentin Rask's pressure, the coffee residue. Klein stayed factual. He said feelings become arguments, actions become evidence. If we caught them forging or attempting harm with witnesses present, the case would hold. Then he leaned forward and asked, "Are you willing to wear a wire?"
Living under the roof of people who want you gone, that's psychological warfare. How did you prepare for the worst while still playing your role?
That evening, I rented a unit at Iron Key Storage under a name they didn't know. I moved anything they could destroy: discharge papers, medals, proof of promotion, clean medical records showing no cancer, and bank documents tied to my bonus. I locked it away, memorized exit routes, and saved Klein's number under a harmless contact name. Back home, I stayed in character. Cyrus watched my decline like a countdown. Delaney hovered with drinks and pills. Tamsin spoke about cherishing time, but her question circled money. Blaze spent imaginary cash out loud. I kept meals plain, water self-poured, phone charged. The trap still needed one piece no one could debate, proof they'd forged my name. So I began building bait that looked like a gift.
This is the moment where greed writes its own confession. Tell me about the bait. What happened when they thought easy money arrived?
Saturday felt too ordinary for what I was setting up. I stayed in my room and watched the kitchen feed on my phone. A delivery came, an official-looking envelope addressed to me, marked urgent. Blaze grabbed it before Delaney finished turning around. He called Tamsin over and opened it at the mail table. Inside was what greed loves: paperwork and a check that looked like early access to benefits, something requiring my signature. Blaze's face shifted, relief, then appetite. He pulled scrap paper and practiced my signature until it looked right. Then he forged it, slow and careful. I saved the clip and sent it to Detective Klein. I didn't feel triumph, I felt confirmation. They would cross any line if it looked like cash. After that, Sunday stopped feeling like a plan. It felt like gravity.
When a lab turns, I think, into we know, your body reacts. What did the results show, and how did that change the risk?
Klein called with the Port Ravelin toxicology lab report. Crushed sleeping pills in the residue. Enough to matter, enough for charges even though I hadn't swallowed it. Hearing it as documented fact made my throat tighten. Klein said it strengthened everything: fraud, identity theft, attempted drugging, but he still needed Sunday. He needed Maribel and Imogen in the room, and my family talking in front of professionals. Stay consistent, he told me. Stay alive. Back home, normal felt impossible. Delaney asked how I slept. Cyrus offered paperwork help. Tamsin smiled too tightly. Blaze avoided my eyes. I ate only what I made and drank only what I poured. My body stayed in performance mode because if I spooked them early, they'd destroy proof and paint me as confused.
Cutting their legal control before the showdown. That's chess, not checkers. What move did you make to sever their grip?
Sunday morning, I drove to the Port Ravelin Notary Bureau before anyone could corner me. I brought revocations for anything Cyrus had coaxed me into signing, plus a living will naming an independent executor who wasn't family. The notary asked if I understood. I said yes, and that earlier signatures had been pressured. She stamped everything, made certified copies, and handed them back. I drove to Iron Key storage, locked originals away, then scanned copies declined so the record couldn't vanish. When I walked in at home, Delaney was tidying like we were hosting guests. Cyrus wore a nicer shirt. Tamsin's eyes were red in a practiced way. Blaze had put on a tie. They were dressing up to watch me fade. But the paperwork that let them steer my life was already severed.
Before the doorbell, there's that quiet hour where grief catches up because betrayal doesn't erase love overnight. What was happening inside you then?
I sat on the living room floor with an old photo album, turning pages like they might explain how we got here. Birthdays, beach trips, matching holiday pajamas, Delaney with frosting on her finger, Cyrus's arm around me at graduation, Tamsin laughing with sand in her hair. The smiles looked real. That's what hurt. I wasn't only angry, I was mourning a family that existed in photos. My phone buzzed. Klein warned my lie could still bring consequences, no immunity promised. The insurer could pursue the loan anyway. I listened and said the only truth I had left. I understood and I'd accept the fallout because I wasn't letting them walk away clean. I closed the album like it belonged to strangers, checked the clock, and waited. The doorbell was about to ring.
When Maribel arrived, your family put on a performance because that's what predators do. They act reasonable. What did you notice in that room?
Maribel walked in right on time, calm, folder in hand. I introduced her, and my family transformed. Delaney's voice broke in the right places. Cyrus asked practical questions like a devoted parent. Tamsin spoke about cherishing time like she'd rehearsed. Blaze added supportive phrases that didn't match the cruelty I'd overheard. Maribel sat down and asked about symptoms and care needs. I described what I'd been acting out: fatigue, dizziness, pain, keeping my story consistent. They offered plans with too much polish. Delaney was eager to explain how she'd been organizing my pills, and Maribel's eyes sharpened, trained to hear what slips through. I kept my gaze low and let them talk. The room felt smooth on top, brittle underneath. When the doorbell rang again, my pulse jumped. The second witness had arrived.
This is where the mask cracks. Because Imogen doesn't do emotion, she does logs. What happened the moment she started asking real questions?
Imogen stepped in, introduced herself, and asked Cyrus about irregular activity on my policy. She didn't invite a story. She asked for logs, timestamps, portal entries, the loan file. Cyrus tried to call it help, claiming I was too sick to handle finances. Imogen pointed to repeated late-night logins from his device and asked why. He stalled. Tamsin cracked and blurted they needed money, and I was dying anyway. Maribel looked up. Imogen kept writing. Cyrus sped up, justifying the loan as an advance. Then Blaze laughed and bragged about quitting work and spending what wasn't theirs. Maribel asked Delaney about medications. Delaney admitted she'd been crushing pills into my coffee to make me sleep. In one sentence, caregiving became confession. The room went cold, and then the front door opened behind us.
When law enforcement enters your living room, the whole family story shatters. What was it like when Detective Klein finally stepped in?
Klein entered with officers, and the performance collapsed. Delaney's face cracked. Cyrus went gray. Tamsin stared at me like I'd rearranged the room. Blaze tried to stand and was held in place. Klein said they were separating everyone for questioning and named it: fraud, identity theft, attempted poisoning. Delaney pleaded instantly, insisting she was only helping me sleep. Cyrus stared at the floor. Tamsin's shock turned to anger when she realized I'd never been dying. Blaze shouted about rights. I stayed seated, heart pounding against the wire under my shirt, praying it captured every admission. Cyrus finally looked at me, and beneath fear, I saw disappointment, not because he'd harmed me, but because I wasn't the easy ending he'd planned. As officers guided them away, tires crunched outside at exactly the wrong moment.
Those tires outside, like a second wave? Who arrived, and why did that raise the stakes even higher?
A black SUV rolled up, and two men in sharp suits walked toward the porch. An officer stopped them at the driveway and asked for ID. One argued and pointed at my house. After a quick check, the officer's stance changed and his radio clicked. The shorter man was cuffed within seconds. The taller one kept talking until another officer stepped close, and his voice fell. Through the window, I saw Delaney's face shift into panic, like she'd been counting on them. Cyrus's eyes darted. Klein spoke with the men briefly, then nodded. They were escorted away without drama, the way you remove a hazard. It was the first time Quentin Rask's shadow showed up in daylight, and it proved my family's debt wasn't only financial, it had teeth.
So watching your own home turn into a crime scene, that's a specific kind of heartbreak. What did it feel like in that aftermath?
The house stopped being a house. Evidence techs arrived with gloves and labels, photographing rooms and bagging items. The coffee cup became an exhibit. Pill bottles were logged. Cyrus's folders were unfolded and copied. They found the recorders I'd placed, and Klein gave me a small nod, no praise, just confirmation. Maribel sat at the table giving her statement about Delaney's admission. Imogen worked with an officer in Cyrus's office, pointing out access logs and forged submissions. Watching professionals map my family's lies made me sick, but it also anchored reality. Klein drove me to the station while the team processed the house. In an interview room, I told the full story, including my lie, because half-truths rot cases. When I finished, Klein said quietly, "You need your own lawyer."
People expect instant relief after justice, but sometimes the body just goes empty. What consequences hit first, and how did life feel right after?
It came in layers. Delaney was booked for attempted poisoning and bail was denied. Cyrus faced fraud and identity theft tied to the policy and loan, and he managed bail through connections. Tamsin and Blaze were questioned for conspiracy and shown their own messages and recordings. Protective orders followed, keeping all four away from me. I expected relief when I held the papers. Instead, I felt hollow, like adrenaline drained out. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Extended family demanded explanations, picked sides, rewrote events. Some called me brave, others called me monstrous. I stared at the screen and understood the trial wouldn't only be in court, it would be in every conversation. I didn't have strength to argue my survival to people who wanted a neat story more than the truth.
Narratives can be violent, especially when a family tries to win the story. How did the wider reaction mess with your sense of reality?
The group chat became a battlefield. People demanded details, picked sides, rewrote me into a character. Some called me manipulative, said I staged everything. Others defended me but pressed for the full story, like it was content. Every notification tightened my chest. I realized violence can spread through narratives, not fists. Delaney's relatives painted me as unstable. Cyrus's side called my parents monsters. I stopped replying, turned off alerts, checked my phone once a day for Klein or my attorney. Silence felt cruel at first, then like oxygen. I couldn't process betrayal and also manage other people's opinions. At the hearing, seeing Delaney in custody made my stomach flip because she still looked like the woman who packed my lunch. Trauma doesn't care about logic, it hits where it wants.
Court is where family becomes evidence. What moments made you realize there was no going back to the old story?
Court made everything sharp. The prosecutor played Delaney's words about the crushed pills, and the judge kept her in custody. Cyrus's hearing was paperwork and logs, signatures, portal access, a fraud timeline dressed up as help. Then Tamsin's arraignment landed. Her messages about finding something stronger that would look natural were shown in plain text. Blaze's video, practicing my signature, then forging it, played for everyone to see. They walked out on bail looking smaller. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing at a graveside for something dying for years. My lawyer warned their defense could use my fake terminal claim against me. Then the insurance company called corporate and blunt, repay the loan Cyrus triggered in my name. Even when you're right, the bill still arrives.
This part matters because justice can still cost you. How did the insurance fallout hit, and what new threat appeared after?
Imogen didn't offer immunity. She sent the file to the county DA and the insurer's counsel, then warned my fake terminal claim could still be used against me. My lawyer secured a cooperation letter. I'd testify, hand over recordings, repay the loan Cyrus pulled, and the DA would weigh my deception in context. I signed with a tight jaw and watched my bonus shrink into penalties. 2 weeks later, an unknown number lit up my phone. The voice sounded like Quentin Rask, calm, accented, certain. He said Cyrus still owed money and arrest didn't erase debts. He suggested I help by paying. I refused, recorded the call, and sent it straight to Detective Klein.
After a threat like that, fear wants to run the whole show. How did you protect yourself without letting fear become your life?
Klein called fast. He said the threat was useful evidence, but the risk was real. He told me to vary routes, watch surroundings, call emergency services if anything felt off. For days, I moved like I was back on patrol. Mirrors, exits, timing. I installed extra locks and a small camera and stopped going out after dark. I hated what it did to my head, turning life into a hazard map, but I couldn't unlearn it instantly. Arden kept calling. He didn't lecture, he anchored me. Keep recording, keep counsel close, eat, sleep, don't isolate. I didn't sleep much, so I built small control. Clean kitchen, predictable routines, keys always in one place. It wasn't peace yet, it was containment. And sometimes containment is how you survive long enough to heal.
When chaos finally quiets, rebuilding can feel unfamiliar. How did you start creating a life that wasn't ruled by them?
I moved into my Port Ravelin place and made it mine. Furniture, shelves, a routine. I hung photos from my unit, reminders that real loyalty exists. The apartment stopped feeling like a hideout. I found a therapist who understood betrayal. I told her the truth. Relief I stopped them, guilt about my lie, rage at Delaney's coffee, grief for the family I thought I had. She said healing isn't deleting feelings, it's not letting them drive. One weekend, Arden came over and sat with me. No strategy, just presence. I admitted I still wish my family could love me in an ordinary way. He said wanting that is human, but their failure doesn't define my worth. It didn't fix me, it steadied me. Steady was enough to keep building.
Last question, Rowan, and I want people to really hear this. Looking back, what did you carry forward, and what do you want them to understand about survival?
Months later, the case was still there. Hearings, emails, paperwork, but my days stopped revolving around it. Therapy became routine. Arden called every week, sometimes for nothing, sometimes to make sure I hadn't slipped into isolation. I took a part-time job at a veteran support center doing palliative care consult work, something quiet and honest. The wire client gave me stayed in my desk drawer, reminding me trust is earned. I wasn't happy, but I was safe. I still tensed when unknown numbers rang or when a Whitcomb name appeared in an update, but I learned to breathe through the spike and keep living. Survival isn't only not dying, it's choosing not to become what tried to kill you.
Thank you for trusting me with that, Rowan. I know it costs something to say it out loud, and I hope anyone listening understands this wasn't drama, it was survival. If this story stayed with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that evidence matters and trust is earned. Drop a comment. I choose to live. It helps this channel reach the right people. And as always, thank you for supporting Broken Relationship Tales.